Hi guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Chris, and if you're here, you're most likely wondering who the villains are going to be in Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. I did a video talking about all the alternate versions of Spider-Man that are going to show up in the film, link in the description. I'll also post a card of it right up above so you guys check that out and be informed on the Spider-Man involved in that movie. With this video, I'm going to take the time to talk about all the villains that are going to be involved in the movie, the different incarnations, the different versions, every single one of them. And also I want to preface by saying that this is not a full-on analysis of every single one of these villains, just a short characteristic detail of each one of them, just so you're familiar with their basic backstory and how they might implement into the movie. Alright, so no more introduction, let's go right into it. The first villain, Green Goblin. Now if you're a Spider-Man fan like me, obviously, you're pretty familiar with the Green Goblin from the 2002 Spider-Man film, the cartoons, and the holy hell that was Amazing Spider-Man 2. Well, in this film, it looks like they're taking a page out of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book and going with the transformation into the giant Green Goblin monster. It's pretty obvious from the trailers that's what we're gonna get, and if you're not familiar with him, he does come out of the Ultimate comic books. Now this would make sense being that Miles Morales was made in the Ultimate comic series, and being that this is sort of the origin story of Miles Morales and how he came about, it makes sense that they'd go with this version. Now with this version, it is Norman Osborn, but this time around he doesn't experiment on himself, as all Osborns tend to do. He's trying to perfect the super soldier serum that gave Captain America his abilities so that he could use it himself, weaponize it, and sell it to the military, becoming a rich man. And of course this goes horribly wrong, transforming him into this giant goblin-like creature. In this form, he has superhuman strength, grows 3 times his size, and attains the ability of pyrokinesis, which is the ability to be able to create fireballs and throw them at people. Now I think to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the most important thing is that he is ultimately responsible for Peter Parker's death. And if you saw my other video, I mentioned one Peter Parker in this film will definitely die. And seeing in the trailers that he is fighting a regular version of Spider-Man that we know, it's most likely that he's gonna have a hand in killing him in this film. Next villain I'm gonna talk about is another famous one, the Kingpin. Kingpin, also known as Wilson Fisk, is a mob boss in New York City. Now again, a lot of us are already familiar with the Kingpin from the cartoons, the awesome Daredevil Netflix show, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. He's a very strategic and organized crime boss that usually hires different thugs to do his bidding, usually responsible for gathering the Sinister Six or just anybody with superhuman abilities and paying them up front to do whatever he'd like. He's actually generally liked by the public, but that's because he never gets his hands dirty himself. However, that does not stop him from being a threat when you're up and close to this guy, because just his sheer size and background in sumo wrestling makes him an expert in martial arts, and just the peak of human strength, he has the ability to squeeze Spider-Man's head into grape juice if he ever got the chance. I'm actually gonna say that the Kingpin is the main villain in this film just because of his background of hiring thugs to do what he pleases, so I think he's gonna have a large hand in hiring all the different villains that are actually gonna show up in the film. For what purpose? Not really sure. But last important thing I'll mention about him is we all know he has this sort of kryptonite with his love interest, Vanessa. You mention her, threaten her, or being mean to her, and this man will stop at no end to kill you. It'll be interesting to see if they bring her in at all into this film, or if she will just be mentioned in the background. But that's just always an interesting characteristic that I think Wilson Fisk has, is that love for Vanessa. Next villain on the list, Tombstone. Now the fact that Tombstone is going to be in the movie is my main reason why I believe the Kingpin is actually the main villain, because he's usually the right-hand man to the Kingpin. Now Tombstone, also known as Lonnie Lincoln, was a kid who grew up in the streets of New York. He was born albino, meaning he doesn't have pigment in his skin, causing him to look pale white. This caused him to be bullied and humiliated all throughout his life, which led him to just have all this built-up anger, and leading him to a life of crime. He eventually even goes as far as to file his teeth to look like a vampire and use his own appearance as a scare tactic when he goes up to fight people. Now he is an assassin for hire, and I do think he is on the payroll of the Kingpin and will be working alongside with him throughout the movie. He really doesn't possess much superpowers, just the generic was exposed by toxic gas in the Osborn factory, which led him to have superhuman strength, speed, all that nonsense that goes with a comic book character. Next up on the list, Dr. Octopus. But he's not the octopus that you think it is. This will actually be a female version of Dr. Octopus. And for my research, there's really only been one female version of Dr. Octopus, and that's Carol Trainer. Carol Trainer is a student of Dr. Otto Octavius, and when he is killed in the Clone Saga, she decides to grab his 4 mechanical arms, put her on herself, don the name Dr. Octopus, and continues living a life of crime for Otto Octavius, because you can do that sort of thing in comic books. correct. But from my sources and information on the movie, she won't actually be Carol Trainer. She'll be more of like a relative to Dr. Octopus in this Ultimate Universe, where Otto Octavius exists, but he never was Dr. Octopus. She is actually the one who eventually becomes Dr. Octopus. So I'm assuming she'll have the last name Octavius, but as to her first name, I'm not quite sure. Just expect a lady Dr. Octopus in this film. Next up, we have the Scorpion. Now, Scorpion has been always one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I'm excited to see if he's gonna go full costume in the live-action Homecoming series, but we're gonna get an alternate version of him in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film. The basic story for Matt Gorgon, which is the Scorpion, is he's a private investigator hired by J. Jonah Jameson to find out, how does Peter Parker always get these pictures of Spider-Man? Now, Peter Parker, with his spider sense, is easily always able to avoid Gorgon when he's around. This causes a lot of frustration to him and J. Jonah Jameson, who hired him. They take it one step further, and JJ decides to experiment on McGregor, paying $10,000 up front for him to have some sort of mutation done on him that ultimately leads him to have superhuman strength, stability, all that nonsense, giving him a scorpion costume and calling him the Scorpion. However, there was a side effect to doing this. The chemicals that made him get superhuman strength sort of drive him crazy, leading him to want to get revenge on J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man for always foiling his plot to kill JJ. That is the main version of the Scorpion, but the type that will actually be in this movie is sort of a human mechanical Scorpion hybrid. There was a toy version of him, but I can't find pictures of it anywhere because Sony is doing their roundabouts of hiding that stuff. They might even hide my video. So I'm just gonna poorly Photoshop what the description of this creature should look like in the movie. You're welcome. So I'm guessing he's just from an alternate dimension that gets sucked into Miles' universe. Last but certainly not least, the Prowler. Now, I specifically saved the Prowler last because I think he is going to be very important to the story in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Not as the main villain, but the one that will have the biggest connection to Miles Morales. And anybody can guess that just from the origin story of the Prowler in the Ultimate Universe. With this version of the Prowler, we have Aaron Davis donning the costume. Now, Aaron Davis is actually the uncle of Miles Morales. As a kid, him and Miles' father used to get in a bit of trouble living a life of crime. As they grew older though, Miles' father decided to stay away from that and become a cop. Davis, however, decided to continue living a life of crime and thus being hired by the Kingpin. Kingpin is the one who supplies him with these gadgets and suits, enabling him to cause the destruction he does when he goes on a crime spree. Now, I already touched upon my last video how his wrongdoings in an Oscorp tower lead to his nephew Miles Morales getting bit and turned into Spider-Man. Well, after all that's said and done, he discovers that he is Spider-Man. With this knowledge, he decides to blackmail his nephew into committing crimes with him. It is at this point where Miles has a heart of gold and says, no way. This is what ultimately causes a big conflict between them because this is blood, this is family to Miles, but being that he's such a ruthless, mean guy, he does have to put him down every now and then. So I think it's going to be interesting if the film decides to tackle all that because they're definitely going to go with uncle-nephew relationship as far as whether he is a caring uncle or a rude uncle. We have to see in the film. It'd be interesting to see if he's actually a ruthless uncle who is willing to kill his own nephew. Dark for a kid's film, but we've seen darker things, Pixar. So that's all the villains that are going to show up in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Please, if you like this video, go ahead and share it, like it, subscribe. I mainly do movie reviews, but I'm getting into different types of videos that I'm making. But as always, guys, I'm Chris. Take care.